The night she lost control on my porch didn't come out of nowhere. It was the final crack in something that had been bending for months. People think revenge stories start with one big betrayal. One dramatic moment where everything explodes at once. But the truth is, the most dangerous situations don't start loudly. They start quietly. They start with small discomforts, small humiliations, small reminders that someone else thinks they own you. Before I tell you how it all started, do me a favor. If stories about justice, karma, and quiet revenge hit close to home for you, tap that like button, subscribe to the channel, and go down into the comments right now and tell me where you're watching this from, what country, what city. I want to know how far this story travels, and your comments help this video reach people who've lived through the same kind of abuse. The night she lost control on my porch didn't come out of nowhere. It was the final crack in something that had been bending for months. People think revenge stories start with one big betrayal, one dramatic moment where everything explodes at once. But the truth is, the most dangerous situations don't start loudly. They start quietly. They start with small discomforts, small humiliations, small reminders that someone else thinks they own you. When I first stepped into that duplex, I felt relief in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not excitement, relief, the kind that settles in your chest when you finally believe you can rest. The owner had been respectful from the beginning. Straightforward, honest, he looked me in the eye when we spoke. He didn't treat me like a risk or a burden. When I handed over my security deposit, it felt like a fair exchange, not a power move. I remember thinking, this is how it's supposed to be. The space itself was modest but peaceful, neutral walls, clean floors, a quiet neighborhood where the air felt still at night. That first evening, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, I sat on the floor eating takeout and listening to the silence. No yelling, no sirens, no tension crawling up my spine. I let myself believe I was safe. That belief lasted exactly until I met Giselle. She lived on the other side of the duplex, sharing a wall so thin I could sometimes hear her cabinets close. Our first interaction was brief, almost polite on the surface. Almost, she smiled, but it was tight, forced, like she was fulfilling an obligation rather than expressing warmth. Her eyes lingered on me a second too long, scanning, measuring, calculating. I felt it immediately, that instinctive discomfort you get when someone decides they don't like you before you've even spoken. I ignored it. Because women are taught to ignore it, we're taught not to be dramatic, not to overthink. So I told myself she was just blunt. Maybe socially awkward. Maybe stressed. I smiled back. I thanked her for explaining where to put the trash bins. I made myself smaller without even realizing it. What I didn't understand then was that Giselle wasn't just my neighbor. She wasn't even technically my landlord. She was a tenant with borrowed authority she clung to like oxygen. She had an arrangement with the owner, in exchange for handling rent collection, maintenance coordination, and inspections. Her rent was cut in half, a sweet deal, one she protected viciously. Within weeks, her presence became unavoidable. It started with parking. One of my friends parked slightly too close to what she considered her side of the driveway. Not blocking. Not touching, just too close in her mind. She stormed outside and scolded them loudly enough for other neighbors to hear. Her tone wasn't firm. It was condescending, enjoying itself. Then came the noise complaints, my TV volume barely audible, yet the moment quiet hours passed, my phone rang. If I didn't answer, the doorbell buzzed. If I ignored that, she knocked. Once, she actually told me she had timed it and that I was 3 minutes late. 3 minutes? She said it like she'd caught me committing a crime. I started feeling like I was being watched. Repair requests became exercises in humiliation. A small issue would turn into weeks of silence, emails unanswered, follow-ups ignored. When she finally responded, it was always vague. I'll look into it. No timeline, no urgency, nothing concrete. And somehow, the message was always the same: you're not a priority. The rent checks were worse. Every month, I dropped them into the same mail slot, same day, same time, and suddenly, they started getting lost. Each time, the implication was clear. That I was careless, that I was irresponsible, that if there was a problem, it must be my fault. I started keeping photos, or cords, proof, because something in me knew this wasn't accidental. By then, my home no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like a test I was constantly failing. At night, I lay in bed hyper aware of every sound I made. I walked softer, I breathed quieter, I adjusted my life to fit inside her invisible boundaries. And still, it was never enough. There was always another rule, another correction, another reminder that she was watching. What made it unbearable wasn't just the behavior, it was the pleasure behind it. The way her voice sharpened when she corrected me, the way her posture straightened when she enforced a rule. She wasn't maintaining order, she was feeding something. And for the longest time, I couldn't understand why. I hadn't done anything to her. I paid on time. I followed the lease. I kept to myself. I wasn't loud. I wasn't messy. I wasn't difficult, yet she treated me like an enemy that needed to be pushed out. Slowly, the truth settled in. This wasn't about rules. This was about resentment. And the most dangerous thing about resentment is that it doesn't need logic. It just needs a target. By the time I told myself I'd just endure it until my lease ended, I didn't realize how far she was willing to go. I didn't realize that she wasn't just trying to control me. She was trying to break me, trying to make my life uncomfortable enough that I'd leave quietly, blaming myself the entire time. What she didn't know was that I was paying attention, that I was learning, that every ignored email, every delayed repair, every petty confrontation was being stored away in my memory like pieces of a puzzle. And she had no idea what picture they were forming. By the time I accepted that Giselle wasn't going to change, something inside me had already shifted. I stopped hoping for fairness. I stopped expecting decency. Instead, I started watching, really watching, the way she moved, the way she spoke to other tenants, the way her tone softened for some people and sharpened for me. Patterns began to form, and once you see a pattern, you can't unsee it. The truth came out accidentally. The way most ugly truths do. One afternoon, while I was carrying groceries inside, I overheard her talking to another tenant near the driveway. I wasn't trying to listen. I wasn't hiding. I was just there, and suddenly, I heard my name, not shouted, not whispered, said casually, like an irritation she'd been holding onto for too long. She never should have gotten that unit, Giselle said, her voice tight with annoyance. I told him I had someone perfect for it. The other tenant laughed awkwardly and asked, then why didn't she? And Giselle scoffed, actually scoffed, because he said her credit was terrible. Said this one, she gestured vaguely toward my door, had perfect credit, like that makes her special. Something cold settled in my chest. That was it. That was the reason. It wasn't about noise, or parking, or rules. It wasn't about responsibility or order or respect. It was about rejection. Her friend had wanted my unit. Her friend had been denied, and I was living in the space she believed belonged to someone else. I wasn't a tenant to her. I was an insult. From that moment on, everything made sense. The hostility, the scrutiny, the punishment disguised as rules. She wasn't enforcing anything. She was retaliating. And because she couldn't punish the owner for saying no, she punished me for existing. Knowing the reason didn't make it hurt less. In some ways, it hurt more, because it meant no amount of compliance would ever be enough. I could follow every rule perfectly and she would still find a reason to come after me. I wasn't being judged on my behavior. I was being judged on my presence. I told myself to endure it. My lease was ending soon anyway. I just needed to survive a little longer, keep my head down, avoid conflict, get out clean. That was the plan. Then the water heater started leaking. At first, it was subtle. A damp smell, a slight discoloration on the floor near the closet. I opened the door and felt that awful, unmistakable squish under my foot. My stomach dropped. I knelt down and touched the floor. Cold, wet, wrong. I didn't panic. Not yet. I dried the area thoroughly, put towels down, monitored it, and then, calmly, responsibly, I sent Giselle an email. I explained what I'd noticed. I explained what I'd done to minimize damage. I stressed that it could become a serious Issue if ignored. No response. Asterisk a week passed. The towels were damp again. The smell stronger. I forwarded the email with a polite follow-up. You may have missed this, I wrote. Choosing my words carefully, but I'm concerned this could become a major problem. Still nothing. I waited another week. The leak worsened. The towels soaked through faster now. I sent another message. This time mentioning that a plumber friend had looked at it informally and recommended immediate attention. I didn't accuse. I didn't threaten. I documented. Finally, after nearly a month, she replied, I'll look into it. That was it. No timeline. No concern. No urgency. I stared at the screen, feeling something twist inside me. She wasn't just neglecting the repair, she was running out the clock. She knew I was moving soon. She knew the damage would become my problem. She was gambling that I'd either ignore it or pay for it with my security deposit, and then she proved it. One evening, as I was taking out the trash, I saw her outside watering her flowers. I mentioned the water heater casually, trying one last time to resolve it peacefully. She didn't even look at me. Just shrugged it off like it was nothing. Then she turned, met my eyes, and smiled. I hope you're keeping things clean in there, she said lightly. I'm very particular about final inspections, white glove standards. If you want any of your deposit back, you'd better be ready. There it was. The threat, calm, casual, calculated. My heart started pounding, but my face stayed neutral. Inside, though, something snapped. Not loudly, quietly. Like a switch flipping. So this was the plan. Ignore the problem. Let it worsen. Blame me for the damage. Keep my money. Push me out feeling guilty and powerless. For the first time since moving in, I felt something other than anxiety. I felt resolve. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay awake listening to the faint sound of water dripping behind the wall, every drop a reminder that she thought she'd outplayed me. I replayed her words over and over in my head. White glove inspection, stickler for the rules, final say. And then I realized something important. She only had power because I had allowed her to be the gatekeeper. I started documenting everything. Every email, every message, every ignored request. I organized them neatly into a folder. Not because I planned revenge yet, but because something told me I would need them. A few days later, fate handed me an opportunity she never saw coming. I was pulling into the driveway when I saw a man standing near the sidewalk. Older, friendly, familiar. The owner, Giselle, was nowhere in sight. And in that moment, everything clicked. I felt my pulse slow, my thoughts sharpen. For the first time in months, I wasn't reacting. I was thinking ahead. Because Giselle had made one critical mistake. She had assumed she was untouchable. The moment I saw the owner standing there, something inside me went completely still. Not frozen, focused. It felt like the world had slowed down just enough for me to finally think clearly. For months, every interaction with Giselle had kept me in a reactive state, defensive, anxious, always bracing for the next accusation or complaint. But now, for the first time, I wasn't reacting to her. She wasn't even there. And suddenly, I realized how small her power really was. I stepped out of my car and walked toward him, forcing myself to keep my body language relaxed, friendly, normal. No complaints, no drama, just gratitude. I thanked him for renting to me, told him I appreciated how straightforward he'd been throughout the lease. He smiled easily, told me he was sorry I was moving out. Said he understood people needed to be closer to work sometimes. He even added, if you ever need anything, just let me know. That sentence landed like a gift wrapped in fate. I hesitated for just a moment, not too long. Not too eager, and then asked if he had a few minutes. I told him I was almost fully moved out and wondered if he'd like to do the security deposit inspection early, just to save time later. I said it casually, like it was no big deal. Like I wasn't holding months of quiet documentation in my bag. He didn't hesitate. Sure, he said, let's take a look. As we walked inside, I felt my heartbeat pick up, but my face stayed calm. This wasn't confrontation. This was confirmation. He moved slowly through the space, nodding as he went. Looks good, he said more than once. You've kept this really clean. Each compliment felt like a brick being laid in a wall between me and Giselle's narrative. Room by room, he found nothing wrong, no damage, no mess, no neglect. Exactly the opposite of what Giselle had been implying for months. Then we reached the closet. The one with the water heater. I stopped walking. Not abruptly, just enough to signal importance. I took a breath, lowered my voice slightly, and said, "There is one thing I'm concerned about, and I'm hoping we can come to some kind of understanding." That got his attention. I opened the closet door. Slowly. The smell of dampness hit first, then I knelt down and lifted the towels I'd placed there the night before. They were heavy, saturated. The floor beneath them was darkened with moisture. "I've been trying to manage a leak," I said, quietly, drying the area, putting towels down, checking it every day. I've had bad experiences with mold before, and I didn't want it to get out of control. His expression changed immediately. Concern replaced casual friendliness. He leaned in closer, inspected the area, frowned. "Have you told Giselle about this?" he asked. I nodded, slowly, calmly, and then I reached into my bag. I handed him a folder, not a stack of loose papers, not a phone with screenshots he'd have to squint at, a neat, organized folder. Chronological. Labeled. Clean. "Yes," I said. Multiple times, he flipped through the emails, one by one. The dates, the follow-ups, the long gaps between responses, the vague replies. I watched his face as the realization settled in. The tightening jaw, the color creeping up his neck. He looked up at me and asked a question that told me everything. Are there other things that haven't been fixed? I didn't rush to answer. I didn't exaggerate. I simply turned the page. More emails, more requests, more silence. By the time he finished reading, his face had gone completely red. Not embarrassed red, angry red. He closed the folder slowly and exhaled through his nose. "Okay," he said. "I think with what I've seen, I'm comfortable releasing your full security deposit." The relief I felt wasn't loud. It wasn't celebratory. It was quiet, grounding. Like finally standing on solid ground after months of instability. And then something unexpected happened. As he said those words, a thought surfaced, calm, clear, perfectly logical. I still owed one more month of rent, $750. And he owed me $500. I looked at him and said, carefully, "Would you be open to a simple solution? Instead of me paying the full rent and you writing me a separate check for the deposit, I could just write you a check for the difference." He paused, considered it, shrugged. "Sure," he said. "That works." Just like that, he signed the paperwork, shook my hand, thanked me for being responsible, and left. I stood there in the quiet apartment, holding a signed agreement that had completely removed Giselle's leverage over me. For the first time since moving in, I smiled. A few days later, I dropped my check for $250 into the mail slot, calmly, confidently, like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. That evening, the pounding started, not knocking. Pounding. Her voice came through the door sharpened, furious, demanding to know why I hadn't paid the full amount, threatening eviction, shouting about rules and authority and consequences. I opened the door just enough to speak. And for the first time, I didn't explain myself. I simply told her the owner had already done the inspection, that the payment arrangement was approved, and that if she had a problem with it, she could take it up with him. The look on her face was unforgettable. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Her eyes widened as her brain struggled to catch up to the reality she hadn't prepared for. She tried to regain control, raised her voice, insisted she had final say, that she did the inspections, that I had to obey the rules like everyone else. I stayed calm, then I told her to get off my porch, and I closed the door. Slowly. Deliberately. Behind it, I heard nothing. Just silence. Asterisk. After I closed that door, I didn't move for a long time. I stood there with my back pressed against it, listening, waiting. My heart wasn't racing the way it used to when she confronted me. There was no shaking in my hands, no tightness in my chest. Just a steady awareness of how quiet everything suddenly felt. For months, my body had been trained to expect retaliation. Another knock, another threat, Another accusation. But none came. That silence wasn't peace yet, it was shock. And I knew exactly why. Giselle had spent so long controlling the narrative that she didn't know what to do once it slipped out of her hands. She was used to people reacting, explaining themselves, defending themselves, apologizing. What she wasn't used to was being shut out, calmly, firmly, without drama. That night, I slept better than I had in months, not because the situation was resolved, but because I finally understood something important. The power I thought she had over me had always been borrowed. And borrowed power collapses the moment the real owner notices how it's being used. A few days later, I heard a knock on my door again. A normal knock this time, steady, polite. I opened it to find the owner standing there with a toolbox in his hand. He smiled apologetically and asked if he could come in to fix the water heater before the next tenant moved in. I stepped aside and let him in. As he worked, we talked. Small talk at first. The weather, the neighborhood, how long I'd lived there. His voice was friendly, but there was something different about his tone now, more careful, more observant. Like someone who'd recently learned something uncomfortable and was still processing it. At one point, he mentioned casually that his daughter would be moving into my unit after I left. She's going to take over the on-site duties, he said. Rent collection, repairs, inspections, all of it. I felt my breath catch, just slightly. Oh, I said, that makes sense. Then, as naturally as I could, I asked the question I already knew the answer to. What about Giselle? He didn't answer right away. He tightened a bolt, wiped his hands on a rag, and then said it plainly. She's moving out. That was it. No drama. No lecture. No insults. Just the finality of a decision already made. He explained that she had decided she couldn't afford the full rent anymore, that the arrangement was ending, that it was better this way, better this way. I nodded, thanked him for fixing the issue, and watched as he packed up his tools. When he left, I closed the door and leaned against it, letting the weight of those words sink in. She wasn't just losing authority, she was losing her home, and suddenly, everything about her behavior over the past months made even more sense. The obsession with rules, the micromanaging, the aggression. It hadn't just been about control over me, it had been fear. Fear of losing the only leverage she had, fear of being exposed. Fear of becoming ordinary again. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the duplex changed completely. Giselle stopped looking at me. When our paths crossed, she avoided eye contact. Her movements were stiff, restrained, like someone trying desperately to maintain dignity while everything underneath was collapsing. Gone was the confidence, gone was the smug authority. Gone were the lectures and the threats. Instead, there was tension. The kind that hums quietly in the air. The kind you can feel even when no one is speaking. I noticed other things too. She started packing, slowly at first, boxes appearing in her windows, furniture being moved. Conversations she used to have loudly on the phone were now hushed, clipped, defensive. I heard her arguing once low and sharp about money, about rent, about how things weren't supposed to happen like this. For the first time, she was the one being inconvenienced, and she hated it. One afternoon, as I was carrying the last of my boxes to my car, she stood on her porch watching me. Not openly, not boldly. Just standing there, arms crossed, jaw tight. There was no rage in her eyes anymore, no sense of superiority, just bitterness, and something else. Regret. Not regret for how she treated me. People like her rarely feel that. But regret that her actions had consequences she couldn't control. I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the nights I lay awake afraid to move in my own home. The way she smiled when she threatened my deposit. The way she enjoyed reminding me that she held power over my comfort and stability. And whatever sympathy flickered inside me disappeared just as quickly. On my final day, I did one last walkthrough of the empty apartment. The walls were bare, the floors clean. The space felt neutral again, like it had been reset. As I stood in the doorway, I realized something unexpected. She had wanted me gone. She just hadn't expected to go with me. I locked the door, slid the key into the envelope, and left it on the counter exactly where the owner had asked. No dramatic exit. No final confrontation. No victory speech, because the real revenge had already happened. She lost her discounted rent, she lost her authority, she lost her position. And she lost the illusion that she could treat people however she wanted without consequences. All without me raising my voice once. All without breaking a single rule. And that, more than anything, was what made it perfect. When I finally drove away from that duplex for the last time, I didn't feel the rush of victory people imagine when they think of revenge. There was no dramatic music playing in my head, no triumphant laugh, no urge to look back. What I felt instead was something quieter, heavier, and far more meaningful. I felt free. Not the temporary relief that comes from escaping a bad situation, but the deep, grounding freedom of knowing I had stood my ground without becoming what tried to break me. For a long time after, I kept replaying everything in my mind, not because I missed it, but because my body was still unlearning the tension it had lived in for months. I would catch myself walking softly in my new place, lowering the volume unnecessarily, pausing before sending emails as if I still needed to defend myself. That's what prolonged control does to you. Even after it's gone, it echoes. But slowly, those habits faded, weeks passed, then months. Life moved forward, and yet, every so often, I would think about Giselle, not with anger, not even with satisfaction, but with a kind of detached clarity. Because distance gives you perspective, and perspective reveals truths you couldn't see while you were inside the storm. Giselle never hated me personally. She hated what I represented. I was proof that she didn't get her way, proof that she wasn't as powerful as she thought, proof that her authority depended entirely on someone else looking the other way. And when that someone finally stopped looking away, everything she had built on intimidation collapsed. People like her rely on silence. They rely on others not questioning them, not documenting, not escalating, not calmly standing their ground. They thrive in gray areas, where fear replaces facts and authority goes unchecked. And the moment you introduce real light, in the form of truth and accountability, they don't know how to survive it. What still stays with me the most isn't her yelling. It's the look on her face when she realized I had gone around her. That moment when her brain stalled, when the story she'd been telling herself that she was in control, that she had final say, fell apart. That look wasn't just anger, it was panic. Because in that instant, she understood something terrifying. She was replaceable. And I wasn't powerless. The irony is, I never set out to destroy her situation. I didn't plan revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't lie, manipulate, or sabotage. I simply told the truth to the right person at the right time and let reality do the rest, and that's something people like Giselle can't defend against. Because you can't intimidate facts, you can't bully documentation, you can't threaten someone who no longer needs your approval. I used to think justice had to be loud to be satisfying, that it needed confrontation, fireworks, a final argument where everything was said, but I learned something far more powerful. Real justice is quiet, it's procedural, it's undeniable. It's watching someone lose their grip not because you fought them, but because they exposed themselves. She lost her discounted rent, she lost her position, she lost her influence, and eventually, she lost the very space she had tried so hard to control. Not because I demanded it, but because her behavior made it inevitable. And the most important part, I walked away intact. I didn't lose my deposit. I didn't get evicted. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't let her turn me into someone reactive and bitter. I kept my dignity, my composure, and my sense of self. That was the real win. If you're listening to this and you're currently dealing with someone like her, someone who abuses a small amount of power to make you feel small, here's what I want you to remember. You are not crazy, you are not weak, and you are not wrong for wanting peace. Start documenting. Start staying calm. Start recognizing that their authority only exists if everyone agrees to it. Because eventually, they will overplay their hand, and when they do, all it takes is one person paying attention. I never saw Giselle again after that. I don't know where she moved. I don't know what she tells people about why she had to leave. But I know one thing for sure. Wherever she went, she didn't take that power with her. And that thought brings me more peace than any argument ever could. Some people call this revenge. I call it balance being restored. Asterisk if this story made you feel something relief, validation, or even quiet satisfaction, hit that like button so more people can hear it. Subscribe if you want more real-life stories where karma doesn't rush, but it never forgets. And go down into the comments right now and tell me where you're watching from, which country, which city. I read every single one. And tell me this. 2. Have you ever seen someone lose power the moment they realized they never truly had it, because those moments are unforgettable?